Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Our Line Starts with Patrick Sharp and Keith Jones. I'm Catherine Tappan. Much to look forward to with our discussions today, and let's tell you what's ahead on the show. The latest on Jim Montgomery's firing in Dallas. Commissioner Gary Bettman unveils a plan to address abusive behavior in the NHL. Pierre McGuire chats with Sabres head coach Ralph Krueger. Looking forward to that one. And as 2020 quickly approaches, we begin to unveil our all-decade team. You guys have put your thinking caps on for that one, I know.
Yes, I'm thinking a lot about that one.
We can't wait to hear who they are. Let's start with the news of the day and the news that just won't go away. Another head coach is fired today. The Dallas Stars fired Jim Montgomery this morning due to what the team's general manager says was unprofessional conduct. Here's Jim Nill.
Upon collecting all the information and executing an internal investigation, including speaking with ownership, management, and general counsel, it was determined that there was a material act of unprofessionalism contrary to the values and standards held by the Dallas Stars organization. It is very clear this cannot be tolerated, and therefore we have relieved Jim Montgomery of his duties immediately. As I said, I'm not going to discuss the act. Unfortunately, I can't, and that's where I stand on that.
Why can't you discuss the acts?
That it's out of respect for everyone involved. It was, as I mentioned, per my statement, it was we decided it was unprofessional. A decision had to be made, and that's our statement. I found out this weekend, and the event happened a few days before that, and that's all I can say. We started the investigation on Sunday once we gathered all the information. As I said, it was determined as a material act of unprofessionalism. That's what happened.
So certainly a major distraction for the Dallas Stars players as they arrived at the rink today for their game tonight against the New Jersey Devils. And it's obviously a big breaking news story coming out of Dallas, Jonesy. What is your response to this?
Well, from the player's perspective, it's a very difficult day because you're coming to the rink thinking you're getting ready for a normal game day skate. It was supposed to be an optional skate, but after all the news happened, Rick Bowness was named the new head coach, and moving from assistant to head coach, he decided it'd be best to get everybody on the ice and skate everybody and kind of come together in the rink as a team and try to move past this as quickly as possible. The lack of details obviously leaves us in a position where we can't really make a comment on what happened to Jim Montgomery, but we can comment on the Dallas Stars and their players. This is a big loss to them. They've played very well this year under Jim Montgomery. They were very good under him last year. So there's definitely adjustments that need to take place. And it's an uncomfortable day for the players losing the head coach, a person that they had a lot of trust in and wanted to play for. And now he's gone for whatever actions took place by him.
It just seemed like that players and this team organization had things going in the right direction, too, after that slow start to the season. How many head coaches have come through Dallas in the last 3 or 4 years? It seemed like Jim Montgomery was the guy. The players were responding. Team's going in the right direction. Everybody had high expectations for this Dallas Stars team. And here comes another round of adversity. So I don't know. I've never been in a situation where my coach was let go day of a game. They play tonight, and it's going to be an interesting game to tune into. I want to see how these players respond. Rick Bowness, I've never met him personally, but just being in the league for the many years that I have, he's been a legend in the National Hockey League, been behind the bench of a half dozen teams throughout my career. I always say hi. He's got a great reputation in the league. I look forward to seeing what he can do behind the bench. But yeah, tough day for the players and the Stars.
And the uncertainty and the questions that the players are going to be asked by everybody, including family members, friends. I mean, you're going to be on the phone all day. They're getting ready to play a game. And at the same time, there's so much uncertainty as to what happened. So everyone's going to be pushing and prodding those guys for information. So it's a very difficult and challenging time for the players to get set and get focused on playing a game. The nice thing about playing hockey is it's your place to escape and come together with your teammates, and I think ultimately that's what the Dallas Stars players will do. But there's a lot swirling around this, and the players have a lot to manage right now.
Yeah, a lot to manage, and you look at the leadership on this team, and I mean, Jim Montgomery was the one that called out his two superstars at the beginning of the season, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin, to get them going, and there was a drastic turnaround with the team. They've been playing very well after that turning point, really, from their head coach. But is that the core leadership group that's going to get them over the hump of what's happening right now and all the distractions you mentioned, Jones? I mean, is there enough substance to this leadership group to get them through it?
Ultimately, it comes down to the players. Winning and losing is how your team performs. Coaches certainly have an influence on that, but there's enough good coaches in that Dallas Stars organization that they'll be able to look to the leadership of those head coaches, previous head coaches before, John Stevens being one of them. I know you played for Sharpie. And Rick Bowness has been around, as Sharpie was talking about, the game forever. Todd Nelson also was a head coach in Edmonton and has had a ton of experience in coaching. So I don't think that will be an issue. I think the team is solid enough, and I think they do have enough leadership that they'll be able to, continue to play as well as they have and try to make some noise when the playoffs roll around.
And time will tell. I mean, who knows what's going to happen the next week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks with the Dallas Stars as far as wins and losses go. But I do believe that this roster is built to win in the playoffs. So I'm excited to get to April. I know we're going down there for January 1. That's going to be a big game against the Nashville Predators. All eyes on the Dallas Stars right now. Yeah.
So he becomes the fourth head coach to get fired this season. Of course, 4 very different situations. I'm not lumping them all together, but you look at 2 of the previous situations with Mike Babcock and also with Bill Peters resigning from Calgary. Are we starting to see that more of these stories are going to be coming out? Are the floodgates opening now? This zero tolerance, one mistake and that's it? Are we going to see more of this?
And based on what we're going to talk in a little bit with, Gary Bettman at the meetings with the owners and the presidents of the hockey clubs and general managers, board of governors, it's obviously a major issue going forward. So they could happen. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you I'd be shocked if it did, because I've been shocked for the last 2 weeks coming in here to get ready to do some hockey and talk about the stuff we love to talk about, and it's turned into different conversations. So I would not be shocked if more things came out. It's without question there is a lot more discussion going on about things, and then we'll just have to see where it goes from there. But I'm hopeful that it doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah, me too. Can we talk about hockey?
Yeah.
Or we
nice, we'll get to hockey in a minute. It does seem like there is, though, this little black cloud, as Jonesy mentioned, over the last 2 weeks, and the commissioner has addressed that. Today, news comes on the heels of a new 4-year point plan that was outlined by Commissioner Gary Bettman on Monday. It was intended to address abusive behavior in the NHL. Here's what the commissioner outlined.
We don't like surprises. The Bill Peters situation was a complete surprise. Going forward, our clubs are on notice that if they become aware of an incident of conduct involving NHL personnel on or off the ice that is clearly inappropriate, unlawful, or demonstrably abusive, or that may violate league policies, we at the league office, Bill Daly or me, must be immediately advised. There will be zero tolerance for any failure to notify us, and in the event of such failure, the club and the individuals involved can expect severe discipline. In order to expedite a change in culture and make clear the expectations we have for the conduct of coaches and other personnel, we will formulate a mandatory annual program on counseling, consciousness raising, education, and training on diversity and inclusion. The program will be required for all head coaches, minor league coaches under NHL contract, assistant coaches, general managers, and assistant general managers. We will focus the programming on trainings and other exercises and initiatives to ensure respectful locker rooms, training facilities, games, and all other hockey-related activities, and teach to ensure bystander intervention techniques, anti-harassment, anti-hazing, non-retaliation, and anti-bullying best practices. Inappropriate conduct engaged in by club personnel will be disciplined either by the team, the league, or both. While discipline as always must be on a case-by-case basis, it is my intention that it must be severe and appropriate and designed to remedy the situation and ensure that the conduct does not occur again. We will create a platform, perhaps a hotline, where instances of inappropriate conduct connected to the NHL can be reported either anonymously or for attribution for us to follow up. It can be any team personnel, such as a teammate, trainer, or even the player himself. In this regard, We understand the critical importance that no one is retaliated against for raising a concern or participating in an investigation, again, either anonymously or for attribution, and I guarantee we will take all reports seriously and follow up.
Commissioner Gary Bettman addressing the 4-point plan now for the NHL going forward. The NHL has always been on the forefront of correcting any kind of issue that has happened or is imminent going to happen, or as we mentioned, more stories that are going to come out after this. What do you make of this 4-point plan that he has unveiled?
Obviously necessary. And Gary Bettman is extremely organized and, can speak in ways that are far and above most people. And his leadership qualities have been outstanding throughout his entire time as the commissioner of the National Hockey League. So he's going to be set and organized in the way that he's going to deal with things from now on. I like the fact that he said, we don't like to be surprised. So they're getting out in front of this now and dealing with it now. And there's going to be a set of standards that every National Hockey League coach is going to have to follow. It's going to be clearly defined. It's going to be about education. It's going to be about, studying and learning about different ways to become a better coach without having to go to the different things that can get you in trouble. So they're going to have guidelines that are going to be clear and that they're going to be able to follow. And there's going to be no more gray area. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere to go. Like this is the way it's going to be. And if it's not going to be that way, then you're not going to coach in the National Hockey League. So I think it's really important. And I think it's great that he's put it out there for everyone to see. It's not just a private discussion amongst the Board of Governors. It's for the entire National Hockey League and their fans and players to look at and recognize that it's an extremely important issue to everybody involved in the National Hockey League. And therefore, I think it's going to end up being a very positive change once everything is done.
Well said, Jonesy. Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to make the hockey workplace, the environment, a very safe and comfortable place. That's how it should be for players, anybody working within an organization. And I applaud the league for taking those changes.
Yeah, when you think about the changes they are going to have to, we're in a world of constant changing, and they are doing their best to try and stay ahead of this. And you mentioned the leadership of Gary Bettman. He's a very, very smart, intelligent man who has done a great job, as you mentioned, leading the league. And you can imagine going forward, they're not happy with any of this news that's been coming out.
And the thing you have to really consider is you have, at any given time, I think 800 players in the National Hockey League, and every player is a different individual. And how one player handles something from a head coach can be entirely different than the way another player looks at that same situation. So education goes a long way in helping someone understand the other side of the argument. So I think it's really important that you get the information out there, you teach, and you have coaches that aren't only teaching players, but they're learning themselves as they go. And in so many cases, a lot of the coaches are former players. And they may have grown up under entirely different circumstances, and some of the coaching methods that worked for them 30 years ago aren't going to work anymore based upon changes in our society, which have been positive changes. And I think that's pretty much what this is all about.
It's interesting that you put it that way also, as far as coaches managing each player individually. I mean, to me, all the good coaches, that's what they do anyway. They find the strengths and weaknesses of every player in the organization, and they put those guys in a spot to succeed and help the team. So huge steps taken by the league, and exciting to see what comes next.
Interesting that the Jim Montgomery situation did not fall under that 4-point plan that Gary Bettman unveiled. So we'll wait and see what more details emerge out of that situation in Dallas, and we'll look forward to seeing the Stars under Rick Bowness and see what he can do now, taking over the reins there in Dallas. Speaking of coaching, more positive coaching stories to talk about. The Buffalo Sabres, they're in a playoff position under their new head coach, Ralph Krueger, and Pierre McGuire had a chance to sit down with him for a conversation.
What a pleasure to be joined by Ralph Krueger. He's like James Bond. One day he'll be in Switzerland, one day he'll be in Russia, one day he'll be in England, and one day he'll be in Buffalo, New York. Now you're in Buffalo. Ralph, great to see you.
Good to see you, Pierre. Nice to be here.
Quick question for you. You have one of the most unique stories from the coaching perspective in the NHL. But you said something last year before you took the job. You were offered the job and you came and hung around in the city of Buffalo just for a day by yourself. What were you trying to find out?
Well, it was a unique situation for me, having been a 25-year head coach and then stepping into another sports world like the English Premier League, and to really be sure that it wasn't just only my heart that was going to pull me back into hockey. I needed to be certain that there was growth here, that the environment I was stepping into at this age was going to be one where I didn't want to be a part of a rebuild. I wanted to be a part of a team surging into that next level of development. So there were so many different things, but above all, I promised my wife I would take her somewhere where it would be fun to live. And so I did that first. I did the wife thing, make sure that Glenda was going to be happy. And I ended up walking through some communities here and found some owner-operator spots really that first weekend where I saw a lot of Europe here in Buffalo. I think it's a sleeper city. People don't see the culture and the intellect actually of the city itself, which I was able to pick up on the weekend. And the sports fanaticism here we all know about. That was the most important piece probably of them all. But I'm really pleased to be here in Buffalo on multiple fronts now.
So you talked about Europe.
Yeah.
My first meetings with you were over in Europe, in Germany and Switzerland. You were a player in Germany, you coach in Switzerland, you helped build the Swiss program, let's be honest. So what led you to Europe? I know where you're from, I know St. John's Ravenscourt where you went to prep school, and I know about Steinbach, Manitoba where you grew up, but what led you to Europe?
Well, I think number one, I did play with Kelly Kissio my last year of junior in Calgary and had a pretty good season, but I was pretty realistic about my chances making the NHL at that time, and I just didn't have the foot speed, but I loved the game of hockey so much, and having a German passport, it was a path that so many Canadians go on, is to Europe, play on national teams there. I was able to experience some world championships and had a 13-year career where I was able to experience hockey at the level I was capable of playing at the time. So just my love for the game actually pulled me over to Europe, and then I planned to try the coaching thing for 1 year, and 25 years later it became my passion, my life, and my everything professionally.
Your vision for the Swiss program in particular I think is phenomenal. Can you talk about how you came about developing players and developing the Swiss system?
So if you look at the Swiss players today, one of the things I have is a complete blend of the European and Canadian game. So everything I've ever coached has both elements in it. So it helps me here in Buffalo where we have 10 Europeans. But then at that time, it was unique in that Switzerland was an all-out offensive, no defense kind of skilled country. And we brought grit into that offense. We brought grit, which doesn't mean running over bodies. And that's the game today, actually, that's being played in the National Hockey League. It's a different kind of grit today. It's the courage to go to the front of the net. It's a courage to get inside when you have the puck, but also defensively to have that body position and to pressure the puck. You don't have to finish the hits as much anymore. And that's what we did with the Swiss program, is we really changed the way the Swiss team played hockey and competed. And I was able to spend 3 Olympic cycles with that group. And I'm so pleased that there's a whole team of Swiss players over here now. The door was knocked down by Mark Streit. He's the one that had to battle as a D, to become a defenseman took him 3 years. But for me, it was that. And I still today have a very global game in my mind when I'm coaching, probably largely influenced by the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, and Canadian hockey kind of all blended together.
Can you tell me about what your feeling was when in 2006 in Torino, Switzerland pulled up the major upset against Canada?
It was the day that Switzerland changed its direction completely. So all the kids playing in the NHL today were between 8 and 12 years of age, watching us beat Canada 2-0 on top, 2 Paul DiPietro goals.
A Canadian guy from Sudbury, Ontario.
who actually helped to change the mentality of the program. And it was a absolutely it was a seismic shift in the way the Swiss people believed in their potential and what was going to happen. And that game was over and above any game that I was able to be a part of. What it changed was the belief that we could play against top countries in the world and compete with them, and also go to the NHL, because Mark still wasn't really a fixed player over here, Mark Streit. But it was a game I will never forget, and forever will be a special one in my memory.
What does a Nico Hischier going #1 overall mean to a program like the Swiss program?
Oh, it just gives it so much confidence. And Switzerland has invested so much in youth hockey. Every professional team there has to have, from top to bottom, a professionally led program of development. And that's one thing that's put Switzerland on the map. And so many international coaches are in there working in the trenches. I profited from all the work that was done in the youth stages, but they have professional coaches for under 16, under 12. These are fully paid professionals that are in there. And that's why it's not by chance or by luck that Switzerland is developing these players. It's their program right through the ranks.
Well, you were the godfather, and congratulations, because that's a
Nice to be a part of
it's
it.
another major feather in your cap. So this is an interesting one. You're the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. Things don't work out, and you leave hockey.
Yeah.
You leave hockey to go to football, not
Yeah.
American football,
No.
soccer.
Yeah.
Ralph, you got to help me out here. How did that help happen?
Yeah. Well, the beauty, Pierre, is that, you know, all of us working in sports we have leadership experiences, and because of I had 2 little kids when I started coaching, and it was quite frightening actually to be a head coach and knowing the dangers of the profession and how longevity is not your friend. And so I threw myself into studying leadership and teams in 93, 94 at the beginning of my coaching career, and I just never stopped. And it took me on to some really good safaris actually with different companies, with different experiences, all the way to the World Economic Forum, where I was able to become part of a panel for 5 years. And so it was that growth actually that opened the door to soccer/football. It was, first of all, the pain of leaving the Edmonton program where I felt we were on the cusp, but the respect I received from Steve Yzerman and Mike Babcock to hire me 48 hours for Team Canada, going to Sochi. But that gave me a time to think. And in that time came this leadership opportunity in the Premier League, which was, for me, I thought, what a way to grow and learn where you're actually then not involved in the front, but you can still work with the players on the off-field kind of spaces. And so for 5.5 years, I was able to grow and learn so much there, and I'm hoping I'm bringing it in here in Buffalo as a new package and a new viewpoint. But it happened by chance because of my excitement of studying leadership and how to treat people right. I just am obsessed with creating cultures and environments where people are treated properly and in the right way, and still finding the buttons to push to hold people accountable for. And that's a tough, it's a tough line that we are wandering back and forth upon to get players and the people you lead to do that. But I'm still in search for that process.
How much has your style changed as a coach from when you started to where you are right now?
A lot. I was much more erratic and emotional, and I'm able, in good and bad times, to keep the picture small. I used to always think it was important to speak about end results and about where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years. And I've learned as I get older, I'm 60 now, that will take care of itself if you really are able to spend most of your minutes in the present. That yes, we need to know where we're going. The direction should be clear. We need to know what happened and look at it quickly, process it, take the lessons with. But more than anything, we should spend most of our life here. And that's what we're doing in Edmonton right now. And that's what I've gotten much, much, much better at. And maybe it's because of age. I know my lifeline's getting shorter, but above all, I'm a person that's really able to try to find excellence in the moment, whatever that moment is, and be focused and concentrated on that is the biggest change and biggest shift for me as a coach, where I would maybe come in and speak about if and when and there and first place and all that stuff. And now it's more about let's be excellent right now. If it's a day off, let's have an excellent day off. And if it's a game day, let's be bang on for the game, and so on. And it seems to be, it seems that the players here in Buffalo have embraced that attitude.
I know the pain of being fired as a coach in the NHL. I know how I dealt with my pain. How did you deal with yours when you got fired in Edmonton?
Well, first of all, just like I said, people reaching out, like phone calls immediately. Tom Rennie, Mike Babcock I already mentioned, you know, Hitchcock, and so on and so forth. There were a lot of coaches that reached out. That was good. But I needed to get actively refocused on what I was going to do now and find another path as quickly as possible, because the only person you hurt if you get bitter and negative and critical is yourself. That's the only person that actually gets hurt. And luckily my instincts and all the leadership work that I was doing, I was going into companies telling them, no matter what, you have to find a positive process. No matter what, if you just had the worst day of your life, if your company just got 20% stock reduction or whatever, you've got to find a positive process, which doesn't mean big smile on your face. I didn't have a smile on my face. I didn't sleep for about 6-7 weeks very well, and I woke up with all kinds of things going on in my mind because I was all in Edmonton, because I loved those players so much, and because I believed in what we were doing, and it was gone. I had to accept that. So yes, there was pain, but in my waking hours, I was driven towards solutions. I was driven towards a new process, and that's what we have to do when we're smacked in the face. We have to get ourselves back on that track of finding solutions, finding new dreams and goals to reach for. And it takes a while when you're so deep in a dream or goal that you're working on. It took a while, and Team Canada gave me that opportunity. But the hockey school I went through as a coach in that time, with Claude Julien, Lindy Ruff, Hitchcock, Babcock, all of us exchanging all information with each other, everything on the table with the Isermans and Hollands and the leaders that were around us at the time, and spending a year in that program deepened. So look at the opportunity I got, Pierre. I mean, wow. And then the Premier League. I would not want to change that with anything. I have no craving to go back, but wow, what an experience that was. And that was built really on my attitude. If it would have been negative and I would have been throwing all kinds of darts at the people in Edmonton that maybe made the decisions, that would have just stalled my evolution.
So let's go to it. Tell the truth now. You just won a huge game in Edmonton. What was the plane line ride back? What was it like?
Well, first of all, the players gave me the game puck, which they don't give the coach very often. That meant a lot to me. The guys understood the value of the game, even though I didn't really speak about it. They were pleased, and yeah, I mean, I'm not a revenge person, so I didn't have that kind of feeling, but I felt really proud to be the Buffalo Sabres coach that whole day in Edmonton after what happened. And on the way back on the plane, there was some fun and jubilation, but the way it is in the NHL, we move on quickly, and I think it's in a nice, quiet way that I was able to enjoy that victory. And back to work here today.
What's the best way to describe your relationship with the Pegula family, the owners of the Buffalo Sabres?
So when I spent that weekend here in May, first of all, the ice was just breaking, and I'm good.
This is like Manitoba.
I'm good. I grew up in Winnipeg, so Steinbach/Winnipeg, so I know all about cold. So people think this is cold. They have no idea. No idea. And I've spent most of my time in Switzerland at 5,000 feet, so I'm not afraid of the cold. So that didn't scare me at all. What I embraced, I've mentioned one thing here already in the podcast, and that's that I really care about being in environments where people are treated properly. And it seems more fitting than ever right now in the environment that we're in. And when I met and have brainstormed with Jason Botterill over the years, it was always the feeling that culture meant more to him than anything. And when I met Terry and Kim, and we spent, we were planning to spend an hour together, it ended up being 4. It was just so natural. We spoke about everything on top of the hockey, and I could just feel their love, number one, for the city and for the people and the fans getting what they deserve here. The dedication they've shown for the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres is tremendous. But they're just very real. I mean, every interaction I've had with them since then, and I had to deal with a lot of billionaires in my time in the Premier League and a lot of owners in the Premier League, and they're just very natural, very real, and come out of the heart. And this was an environment where, I mean, all the options that I had fell away that weekend. I could have returned to the Premier League. I could have come into another role, possibly in the NHL. But that was the final push over the line, that I wanted to be the Buffalo Sabres head coach and work in an environment where culture mattered above all.
Your eloquence is so apparent as you talk, which is really unique for a hockey coach, I will tell you. But I watch how you message with your players during the game, and you talked about how you've calmed down since you first started.
Yes.
And I'm seeing the results in Jack Eichel's play in particular. How did you address Jack Eichel when you took over the job here?
Well, it was excellent because our first meeting was in Slovakia, and we planned to have some drinks together, and we ended up with his partner, Jack and I, we ended up spending 4 hours together, and I would say we maybe spoke about hockey for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And since then, it's just been organic. We don't have hours and hours of conversations. It's just a very natural exchange of body language and eye contact and some meetings here and there, of course. But above all, I felt in him the competitor that he is and the hunger he has to lead a team to victory and in the right way. And his individual statistics or what he does in that process are less important for him than the team. So he puts team first, and I really felt that in him right away. And since that first meeting, it's just been easy, I have to say, really easy. And he's an amazing athlete, an amazing hockey player, but also a person. He's embracing the game without the puck. I believe he will be the most complete player in the National Hockey League when he's done. His tracking speed and his game without the puck, his willingness to pressure and get it back is as good as any of the top players in the league. So with that offensive skill set comes this other person, and he is putting that into action. And what an example he is! Works as hard as anybody in practice, or on or off the ice. So the relationship is very easy, very natural, very organic, and we look forward to every day together.
Ralph, am I overstating it by saying he's a legitimate MVP candidate this year?
Oh, for sure. There's no question that he, in all aspects, will be in that circle.
And what, as a coach, you're always looking to manage people.
Yes.
What's made the Buffalo Sabres better this year in terms of your management of the players?
So a lot of excellent work's been done here over the last few years. I've been involved in the rebuild processes when players are 18, 19, 20, and we've got some core guys that are in their 5th season in the league now, and we still have Rasmus that we're working with. How exciting will his future be?
Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah, Rasmus Dahlin, because we have 3 Rasmuses.
You got a few of them here.
Yeah, exactly. But I like where the group is at right now, and I really am excited with the phase that we're in here overall.
I don't want to put too much pressure on you. We've been friends for a long time, so this is my last one for you.
Yeah, no.
Complete this sentence. The Buffalo Sabres will make the playoffs if
we continue to keep the picture small and continue to get better every day. So that's what we're working on every day. Improvement, small picture, and keep the white noise outside of our locker room, and we're going to be fine.
Merry Christmas, Ralph.
Thanks. Merry Christmas also to everybody behind the camera.
Okay,
thanks.
All right, our thanks to Pierre. A great conversation there with Ralph Krueger. And, you look at the Buffalo Sabres. I remember when they hired Ralph Krueger and reading the press release and thinking, a chairman of the Premier League is now going to come in and be a head coach in the National Hockey League? Like, how does that even work? And then getting the opportunity to meet him at the NHL draft this year in Vancouver and chatting with him for a conversation on our broadcast I was so impressed. He seemed like he had what it was going to take to get a team to where they need to be, which is exactly what he's doing right now with this Buffalo Sabres team, who we've seen dip a little bit, but they're in a playoff position right now, Jonesy. What's he doing that's so great?
It shows you how creative he is, because he started in hockey when we knew him with the Edmonton Oilers, and then Sharpie was involved with the Olympic team, the Canadian Olympic team that you were involved with. So he had been obviously introduced to the world of hockey. The fact that he left and went over to the Premier League was shocking and remarkable at the same time. So he's obviously taken whatever he picked up over there and continued to develop his coaching style. And now he's taken on a Sabres team that had been floundering for the last decade. And the challenge was to bring everyone together on that Sabres roster and make them play up to their potential. It's a much deeper team than it's ever been before, in fairness to some of the coaches that were there previously. There's no doubt that he has more weapons to play with, and he has a much more mature captain in Jack Eichel, which obviously is a great thing. He's an elite player that's playing at an elite level right now. But he's had to bring a lot of different guys together. When you have depth, you have options, but you also have decisions. And I think Ralph Krueger's done a really good job of putting people in the right places in that Sabres lineup.
It sounds to me as if he's a great communicator to his players in Buffalo. At least he was in 2014 in Sochi. He was an advisor. He was on the coaching staff in the Olympic Games, and his kind of role on that team was to scout the opponent, give us an update on some of these players that play for Norway or Austria. And you might say, well, yeah, there's not a whole lot of Norwegians and Austrians playing in the National Hockey League today, but Ralph Krueger spent a ton of time in Europe learning the European player, personalities. And I feel like he's bringing that to the Buffalo Sabres, and he's dealing with all different kinds of players, communicating in a good way. I don't think Buffalo's as good as they were in October, and I don't think they're as bad as they were in November. They're probably somewhere in between. And the fact that Jack Eichel, the team's franchise player, is playing at a high level that he has been all season long is good news for Ralph Krueger. I like the way he's coaching that team, and I think they're going to be in the fight all year long.
Yeah. Do we think they're going to be in the playoffs?
Tough division.
Yeah, no doubt.
And Toronto's starting to get their game going, so it becomes that much more difficult. Florida under Joel Quenneville is a very good team and a much improved team, and the Bruins have been the best team in that division from the drop of the hat. So it's a big-time challenge within that division, but Buffalo is capable of getting there this year, and I think they're going to be right in it to the last minute.
Well, teams are left for dead. Weeks ago, all of a sudden, a team like the Minnesota Wild rattles off 11 or 12 games with points. We wrote off the St. Louis Blues last year, and we all know how that story turned out. So I think they got a tough road to make the playoffs, the Buffalo Sabres, but I'm not going to sit here and say they're not making it.
We've seen stranger things happen, right? Like you mentioned the Blues. All right, well, let's take a look at the finale of this podcast today, guys, and it's exciting because we're going to take a look at the all-decade team looking at 2010 through 2019, and it's based on a combination of stats, awards, Stanley Cups, and overall impact on the NHL over the past decade. So we're going to do this in two parts. You guys today are going to draft 6 defensemen and 2 goalies. Next week, we're going to have Anson and JR put together their 4 lines of forwards.
Yeah.
Anson and JR are going to coach this team with
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
if I
that would be
signed up for
interesting.
that.
You mentioned Joel Quenneville, but with the Florida Panthers, he may be the coach of the decade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Didn't
You
think
and
about
you
the
and your
coaches
Hawks.
yet. Yeah, forgot about them.
All right, let's start with Jonesy. Give us your top defenseman of the decade.
It's Duncan Keith, a guy that Sharpie knows well, and from covering every one of his Stanley Cup championships, he was, in my eyes, the most important player on the ice frequently. Throughout every Stanley Cup championship that he won, he was on the ice more than anybody else. He showed great speed, great composure, great influence on the game. And in my eyes, he is an easy choice to put on the all-decade team.
Yeah, me too. He's on the top pair, and everything that you just said about him can probably apply to Drew Doughty as well. Duncan Keith once told me in the playoffs that I asked him why he stays on the ice so long. He's taken well over a minute shifts, and he says, if something's going to happen in this game, I want to be responsible for it, good or bad. And to me, that's the type of teammate you want in the locker room. So Duncan Keith's a no-brainer. Drew Doughty played against him during the decade so much. LA, with all the success that they had, Drew Doughty was front and center with that, not just with the National Hockey League. He did it internationally, Team Canada. He was always an impact player. He made the 2010 team, I think, is a really young player, kind of blew some people away with how well he handled that situation. And then again, in 2014, he was arguably the best player. So those are my top 2 defensemen, Doughty and Keith. But we're going to make a lot of mistakes on this. And a few people.
But those were a given, those 2.
I don't think anyone can argue with those.
We both sent those in, and we both had both guys as our top 2 picks. And I agree, Doughty influenced every game that he was involved in as well, and did it with a smile on his
Yeah,
face.
and stirs the pot a little bit while he does it, right?
He's got a bit of everything to his
Sharpie's
game.
got to be a pain in the neck to play against a player like Drew Doughty because he seems to just not care what anybody else thinks of him. He's going to go ruffle feathers a little bit out there.
He's a hockey player through and through. I remember sitting in warm-ups, skating around the ice next to Doughty, said hi to him. We were going to the Olympic Games in a week from the game that we played. And I was up on the Hossa Taves line playing against Drew Doughty. First shift of the game, he takes me out with a huge hip check along the boards. I'm thinking, what's wrong with this guy? We're going to be teammates in a week.
We got to get the gold in a week.
But that's Drew Doughty for you. He's a hard-nosed competitor, pretty good player.
That's awesome. All right, so Duncan Keith and Drew Doughty are your top pairing. Who's your next D pairing?
This is a unique player. It's Erik Karlsson, and he put up massive numbers throughout the decade, kind of revolutionized the position. And whenever you were filling out a hockey pool and you're picking your defenseman and it was relying on points, Erik Karlsson was the no-brainer pick, much like Crosby and Ovechkin would be for scorers offensively. Karlsson was the guy that you took right away. And he did things that we didn't expect defensemen to be able to do or could do. and he went out there and did them on a nightly basis. Whether his team was good or not, in Ottawa, they had different teams. Some were very good and some weren't so good, but every night Erik Karlsson was a great player.
I love what you said about revolutionizing the position a little bit, didn't you? Like now, all of a sudden, now every team's drafting these maybe undersized, skilled defensemen. They want offense from the back end. Erik Karlsson this past decade was kind of one of those players that did that. For years, the Norris Trophy would go to a well-rounded defenseman, someone that was solid in their own zone. Plus minus was always a big factor. Erik Karlsson won those awards by scoring goals and putting up points and helping his teammates. Because of that, I'm going to stay along those lines and add a partner to his defensive pair, a guy that's withstood the decade, who's adapted to a lot of different changes in the game, is Zdeno Chara of the Boston Bruins. Boston
withstood multiple decades.
Yeah, he's been around a long time, but a guy at that size, he's adapted to the speed of the game. The long reach certainly helps. His leadership, it's talked about all the time, and that's noticeable from the outside looking in. I don't know much about the Boston Bruins, never played there, haven't been in that locker room, but you can tell that there's a certain vibe with the Boston Bruins, and I think Chara's got a lot to do with it. I don't even know how old he is now. I know he's in his 40s. 42 and he's still getting it done.
Three Stanley Cup appearances.
Yeah.
Of course, won the Cup in 2011. You guys stole it away from him in 2013.
Don't make him mad. Don't bring that up. He was good at the start of the decade. He's good at the end of the decade. He's good enough for my top four.
And he set the bar so high for an individual in the way that you not only perform, but how you act and how hard you work. He just continued to find different ways to improve, not only as a player, but as a person, then pass that on to other people. So that's the one thing that has always stood out to me about Chara is his ability to make everybody feel like they're a part of it. And I think that's a big reason why the Bruins have been so successful throughout the decade. Players like Chara and, of course, some help from Bergeron along the way. But those guys have really done a great job in passing along leadership qualities that will serve the Bruins well long after the time that they've moved on.
Yeah, classy individual, too. Zdeno Chara, anybody that's ever had the opportunity to be around him always looks you in the eye, always addresses you by name. He's a wonderful person to be around, but a tremendous leader as well as the captain of that franchise for so many years. So you've got Karlsson and Chara. Who's the next D pairing, the third D pairing?
For me, it's going to be Victor Hedman. And again, so much of that has to do with his ability to control the way the game is being played. That when the puck is on his stick, it's very difficult to get away. And when he moves it, it's going to someone normally on his team. He was a fabulous skater and continues to be. He's still one of the fastest guys in the National Hockey League. And he had the offensive capabilities to pick up some big points along the way as well. Always in the conversation for the Norris Trophy, and deservedly so. Ended up being there at the end of the year a couple of times, or at least once. But there's no question that his abilities and what he has done for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the last decade go a long way in allowing me to think that he would be that type of player that should be on the list of the top defensemen of the decade.
When you look at that second pair with Chara and Erik Karlsson, if you kind of merge that player, it's kind of like a Victor Hedman, isn't he? He's got the size, the physicality. He can skate up and down the ice. He jumps in offensively. He's excellent on the power play. I agree with you that Hedman needs to be on that all-decade team. And I'm going to add another one. I'm probably going to get beat up for it just because I'm going to the Chicago Blackhawks again. But they were the team of the decade, in my opinion. And Brent Seabrook's got to be on this list. Forget about all that he brings to the ice. He's the vocal leader. He's big presence in that locker room in Chicago. He's been doing it since 2005. I got to get him on there because he also shows up time and time again in the playoffs. He was on the 2010 team, 2013, his leadership came through. We remember him putting his arm around Jonathan Toews in the penalty box. And then 2015, the Hawks win the Stanley Cup, basically playing four defensemen, and he was one of those guys. So Brent Seabrook did enough this past decade to make that team for me.
I don't think you're going to get much kickback on that, actually. I know the last few years have not been great for Seabrook. They have not been Seabrook-like just because age and miles have caught up to him because he played so physically and gave every ounce of what he had to allow the Blackhawks the opportunity to win those cups. I think you have to applaud him for the type of career he had. And that style of defenseman, he didn't just knock people over and defend. He picked up huge points, power play goals, momentum-changing goals, and was a big reason why the Blackhawks were successful. So that's it seems like a difficult argument, but it shouldn't be because he did a lot from that position. It is.
It's hard to see what's happening to him from a public criticism standpoint because this guy gave it all and helped bring 3 Stanley Cups to that city. But now it's, trade him, get rid of him. He's too old. He's too this. He's too that. Which they're saying about Taves and Kane and all the rest of the.
And Tappin and Jones.
That's right. Get rid of them. Yeah. Hey now.
But also,
never about Milbury.
The reason
You're
why
the ageless wonder.
Maybe we take a little heat on some of those picks is because of all the great players that we left off.
That's true.
Shea Weber comes to mind. He's a force to play against. Still performing well. I know injuries beat him up through the decade. Chris Letang has a bunch of Stanley Cups and awards to put in his back pocket as well. There's guys all across the league. Roman Josi of the Nashville Predators is coming into his own, and
Brent Burns.
Yeah,
who also kind of revolutionized that position. Right. But I guess we could make the argument he started as a forward when the decade began.
Maybe JR will have him up front.
He'll be one of the. Exactly. He may be. Ooh, good teaser, Sharpie. I like it. Okay, so we've got the 6 defensemen rounded out. Now we have to pick 2 goaltenders. Who do you have, Jonesy?
For me, this was easy. As difficult as when you look at the list of goaltenders that you could obviously choose, Jonathan Quick stood out to me. I think he accomplished so much with his athletic ability and gave the Kings the opportunity to win 2 Stanley Cups. Without Jonathan Quick in his prime, I don't think the LA Kings were winning. And if you remember, the Kings barely squeaked into the playoffs on a couple of times that they went on long runs, and Quick had to make spectacular saves. He also had to be an emotional leader for the team as well. How I can remember frequently looking at him and his reactions in the net when he was upset with the way the guys were playing in front of him, going up and down the bench and getting everybody going that way. So he really pushed the envelope, and also in a day and age where big matters in net, he's not a big guy, and he still found a way to get it done by playing his position with great athleticism. And it was a great show to watch him in his prime. So Jonathan Quick would be my choice as the best goaltender of the decade.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. He looks like a human joystick sometimes, like someone's controlling video games. He's going side to side. He's fronting the shot. He was unbelievable for a long time. This one's tough for me, the goaltending position, because I often get my own feelings in it on who I couldn't score goals on or who I did have success with. For the decade, you can't argue with what Henrik Lundqvist did with the New York Rangers. I know the team trophies aren't quite there, but from start to finish, he put up incredible numbers, and really being the goaltender for the New York Rangers and carrying it the way that Hank did is pretty special. He's got to be discussed. Roberto Luongo did a lot with those Vancouver Canucks, had some good teams, and I know he put up a lot of wins. Marc-Andre Fleury did it with 2 different teams, Vegas and Pittsburgh, but I got to go with my goaltender, Corey Crawford. He came in and was our starter in 2011, so the start of the decade, our team was not very good in 2011 and 12. We got to the playoffs both years because of Crow. 2 Stanley Cups as a starting goaltender. I know the focus wasn't really on him a lot. There was too many other great players to take the headlines away, but I saw this guy come through in the clutch time and time again. So Corey Crawford's on my all-decade team.
And the focus of the opposition was often on Crawford, trying to find ways to beat them. I'm talking about his glove hand back in the day. And then he found ways to get it done as well. Crawford turned into an outstanding goaltender. And Lundqvist would be a great choice as well. I would agree with that. Marc-Andre Fleury.
Fleury's a guy that...
Carey Price.
Price, you could argue that Price is the best goaltender for the decade, but he just didn't get as many huge wins as some of the other guys that we're talking about, including Stanley Cups, and I think that obviously weighs a lot into the decisions that we're making.
It's a tipping point.
And you would pick Fleury had he been the starting goaltender when Pittsburgh was winning their other cups. I mean, he was there, but the first one he won wasn't in the decade. So the fact that Matt Murray came in and kind of stole the net from him isn't as strong of an opinion to have on Marc-Andre Fleury because of that, but he's been a phenomenal goaltender, almost won a Stanley Cup with an expansion team in Vegas in their first year in existence.
All right, so let's recap the all-decade defensemen. Duncan Keith and Drew Doughty, Zdeno Chara, Erik Karlsson, Victor Hedman, and Brent Seabrook. And your all-decade goalies, Jonathan Quick and Corey Crawford. We'll look forward to hearing from JR and Anson and get the forwards, but I can tell you this, I wouldn't want to play against any of these lineups.
Good mix. That's a good mix there. Some good size.
I don't think anybody's beating any of those guys for any. It'll be a low-scoring game with those guys on the ice.
I like it.
All right. Well, that's it for another edition of Our Line Starts. New episodes come your way every Wednesday. You can subscribe for automatic downloads wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us this time. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.